President Trump rang in 250 years of America richer than ever, and you should know that. This week, he disclosed more than $2 billion in personal income during his first year back in office. That is more than quadruple what he made back in 2024. According to this disclosure, more than half of the money was made through his family crypto business, an industry that he has direct influence. Donald Trump has direct influence over this as president of the United States. He was asked about it repeatedly, time after time. And you know what his answer was? Quote, "You know why I'm profiting? Because the stock market's going up. Everybody's profiting." And he is kind of right. The stock market has been having a heck of a year, despite the war with Iran, which President Trump started. There was a major oil shortage and also an AI bubble that just might pop. But the stock market, as you all know, is not the economy. And for millions of Americans, those record highs on Wall Street have not translated into relief at the grocery store or at the gas pump. Aside from crypto, the disclosure paints just the most remarkable picture of the president's finances. Nearly $290 million came from real estate. Tens of millions of dollars came from tech stocks, and $86 million alone from lawsuit settlements with media companies like ABC and CBS and Meta and YouTube. Unrivaled is how the New York Times describes the president's financial exploits. But, and you probably knew where I was going with this, it is not just Donald Trump. It is his sons, his wife, his vice president, his current cabinet. Though it pales in comparison to his boss, Vice President J.D. Vance did have a pretty lucrative year in 2025, too. According to federal disclosures, he brought in between $1.4 million and $7.4 million bucks, including his investment income. The bulk of his income, though, came from royalties and advances related to his book, Hillbilly Elegy, according to MS Now, on book sales alone compared to 2024, and that is at least a 20-fold increase. That's all up from a range roughly of $213,000 to $1.3 million the year before, though this form does not reflect his salary as a U.S. senator. So, are we sensing a theme here? J.D. Vance was out-earned, though, by the First Lady. Melania Trump reported between $17.3 million and $18.2 million in income last year. Most of that came from the licensing agreement tied to the Melania documentary acquired by Amazon that you probably did not see. You remember the Melania movie, the documentary that somehow reportedly cost $75 million to make and promote, but flopped at the box office. It made back only $16 million. The First Lady also reported roughly $521,000 in book royalties and more than $6 million from her own meme coin. Everybody's got a meme coin. And then there are Don Jr. and Eric Trump, still expanding the family's business interests while their dad sits there in the Oval Office. The president's sons have major upcoming developments and licensing projects stretching from the Middle East to Southeast Asia. According to ProPublica, Don Jr.'s venture capital firm called 1789 Capital invested in Vulcan Elements just 3 months before the company received a $620 million government loan. Perhaps that is just divine timing. A spokesperson for 1789 Capital says, quote, "There are zero conflicts at 1789 where no one has ever served in government." The Trump sons' newest venture also include investments tied to drone and defense companies, industries set to receive billions of dollars as the administration ramps up military spending. According to MS Now's review of public records, the president's eldest sons are linked to investments in at least 10 different companies with military applications. Those firms have collectively received about $3.7 billion in federal funds since the start of the second Trump administration. A spokesperson for the Sons say they play no role in awarding or managing these contracts, but as the Wall Street Journal's editorial board put it, quote, "Assuming all of this is legal, it is still an unseemly display of using the presidency for family profit. It is hard to believe the Trump boys would be able to do the same deals if Dad wasn't in the Oval Office. The main difference between Hunter Biden's foreign dealings and the Trump projects is that the Trumps are brazenly open about theirs." The president would beg to differ. He was asked about the potential conflicts of interest this week and argued his kids shouldn't have to put their lives on hold just because their dad is the POTUS.
I feel badly in a way for my kids because every time my kids do, if they invest in a stock or if they go and do a bill, anything they do, because the presidency is so powerful, so big, everything, if they buy a cupcake company, well, the energy to make the cupcakes is, you know, sort of like, how's my energy policy? So therefore you have a conflict. So it's pretty tough in that sense. I tell my kids, stay away from as much as you can stay away from, but they also have a life.
Pretty tough. Pretty tough. Sure seems pretty tough when the same family helping shape national policy also stands to benefit from industries directly affected by those policies. And while all of these accusations of grifting and profiting off the presidency have never been more blatant, they aren't new. We've been asking just how much Donald Trump and others like him are extracting from their positions of power for years. In fact, I did an entire 4-part documentary series on it called American Swamp with my dear friend and colleague Katy Tur during the first Trump term about the corrupting influence of money in Washington and the true victims of it, the American people. Here is me and Katy back in 2019. The Trump International Hotel opened just 2 weeks before Election Day in the Capitol's old post office, following a renovation estimated to cost $200 million. The Trump Organization is now 6 years into a 60-year lease of the building from the federal government. It's almost hard to believe that it isn't explicitly illegal for foreign governments or foreign entities to stay here.
I think that's the question.
Even us, like the idea that we, as people who cover him, could sit here and pay for coffee, for potato chips, that ultimately the money goes into his pocket. There are just so many issues. Why would you want to put yourself in that position? The potato chips, I think, were the least of our worries. What does it say about the state of this White House that you could play that same clip from 2019 today, and it has only gotten far, far worse? Joining me now is David Cay Johnston, investigative reporter and co-founder of DCReport.org, a nonprofit dedicated to policy reporting and perspective. He has written and reported on this topic extensively, including for one of his books, The Big Cheat: How Donald Trump Fleeced America and Enriched Himself and His Family. Also with me is Jonathan Swan, New York Times White House reporter and co-author of the new book, Regime Change: Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump, which just so happens to be the best-selling nonfiction book of the year. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here. And David, let's start with you. You have covered the president's finances for decades. Is there anything in particular in this disclosure that genuinely did surprise you?
Well, the size of the money for sure. But fundamentally, I hope we can stop talking about Donald Trump as a businessman. Donald Trump is a cash extractor. He uses other people's money, in this case, the taxpayers' money for a number of the ventures in order to extract money. He's not building wealth the way business people do by reinvesting in and propping up their business. And I warned he would do this more than a decade ago, and we're now seeing absolutely clear evidence that he is there to benefit himself and his family, not anyone else, unless they are allies he needs.
Jonathan, I want to read a little bit from your blockbuster co-authored by Maggie Haberman about the years in between his presidencies and about how Trump had come to believe he had been too accommodating of long-established norms. You write, quote, "He had stopped short of what most ethics watchdogs had demanded in his first term, putting his holdings into a blind trust, and instead agreed reluctantly to turn over control of the Trump organization, to his sons. He would, however, stop them from making any new foreign deals during his first term. Trump made it clear that if he won again, things would be very different. His sons could do as they pleased. I prohibited them from doing business in my first term, and I got absolutely no credit for it," Trump complained in a New York Times interview in early 2026, talking about his sons. "I didn't have to do that, and it's really unfair to them." He added, "I found out that nobody cared, and I'm allowed to." It sounds a lot, Jonathan, like the way he says that this is just so tough. It's so tough for him and his children. How does it all tie into what we're seeing now and how he has molded this second term?
Well, the biggest challenge we had, Maggie and I, in reporting this part of the book was there was just so much of it. And actually, journalistically, almost it felt like a failure at the end, because I genuinely believe we know only a tiny fraction of what's going on. Everywhere you look, there's more of it. I mean, just to give you one example that people don't really talk about, but we get into in the book, the presidential library, right? The Trump Presidential Library, which is, of course, not really a library, but actually a skyscraper. Eric Trump has been soliciting money from Gulf countries, the Saudis and others. Trump's own cabinet has been playing into that. So Howard Lutnick, there's been stories about his sons and his former company making money intersecting with federal policy. Trump was actually quite irritated about those stories. Lutnick then gives $25 million to the Trump Presidential Library, and Trump starts talking about how, the only reason he puts up with Howard's BS is because he's given me $25 million. And isn't it great? Howard's the greatest guy, et cetera. So, you could spend 4 hours talking about this stuff, but the bottom line is Trump thought that he had left money on the table, and he feels that there is no risk in any type of accountability. He has sweeping immunity conferred to him by the Supreme Court. We have in our book reporting, he's told people privately he's going to pardon anyone who came within 250 feet of the Oval Office. So the people around him have no fear, really, of any kind of consequences, and that's the environment that you now see.